Welcome to the Manitoba Ag Days podcast, where we hear from some of the most relevant, up-to-date, informational speakers in our industry. In episode 19, Trevor Atchison, a producer from Pipestone, Manitoba, tells his story, trying to fit in sustainably.
K to magnesium ratio again at 0.6. Here's where we see the real significance of boron. And again, it's a rhizobium. And we've got other literature that says that nodulating rhizobium respond to boron, but in this particular case, our endophytic rhizobium also very strong correlation to soil available boron. So we take this relationship, and you can't see this again very well. This is some papers done, not by us, this is some work done by researchers looking at mangrove groves in other parts of the world and just what makes their soil biota in better shape. And they're actually finding out as well that nutrient concentration, and in the case of the mango grove, the particular bugs that support the mango are very sensitive to boron. So again, another response there. And I don't spend too much time with those because you can't read them. So I asked the question to my technicians. I said, you know what? When I look at these profiles and I look at what I would expect to Pseudomonas and Bacillus and Rhizobium, because when we look at the numbers now, we can almost see the predictive bugs that will be there based on some of these algorithms. And I said, you know, I don't really agree with some of this data because the Rhizobium in this particular field, based on the bulk GFI and K and everything we see, should be a lot stronger. But it's good, but it's not where it should be. So I had them go back to the data and select out the data going from the lowest boron to the highest boron, and look what we found. Almost a straight line, linear correlation to boron levels, even though it's all low. And this is why the technician said, I don't know how you want me to look at that, because all of our boron levels in our trials were low, but this is what they found. So again, very strong correlation to what we're seeing in the data set and for rhizobium and this relationship to soluble boron. So we look at the different bugs. We know the gram-negatives are the good guys. The Pseudomonas and Rhizobium are really the guys doing the job. The Bacillus are gram-positives, and they actually have a bit of a negative impact on performance. Now, we have a lot of products in the marketplace that are basically Bacillus. The reason we're going there is Bacillus are tough and rough, and you can't kill them. So they're very stable in anything we put them on, and they do respond. They do actually give us some stimulation. Matter of fact, when I look at our soil health index, and we see the population of the bugs move from a very diverse population to start being selective, the first one I see at the table is Bacillus. So as a plant identifies it's starting to get a better rich environment, it starts moving Bacillus in. Bacillus are crazy antibiotic producers, and this is why they work in the products we're putting on with. So the plant, my thinking is the plant says, well, things are getting better. I want to clean up the neighborhood a little bit, so let's bring in the antibiotics and clean things up. They're the paramedics, if you will. Bring them in, clean things up. And then what we see as the soil health index moves from, just the low, medium level up into the good range, the Bacillus population drops from 10 to the 6th to 10 to the 4th and maintains there, and our Rhizobium and Pseudomonas and nitrogen fixers go up. So there's some real shifts happening in this rhizosphere that we're seeing happening from these different communities. So again, the gram-negatives versus GFI, a strong correlation, and the gram-positives, the opposite. Here we have yield versus GFI and low gram-negatives. So the lower the gram-negatives, the better the yield. The higher the yield versus GFI with high gram-negatives, again, very strong correlation. So we start putting this stuff together, and we start seeing some real neat things from some of the data and some real predictives. So microbial diversity, when we talk about overall microbial diversity, the complexity of interactions between plant and microbial communities increases with microbial diversity. The resulting diversity and complexity may act as a buffer between the positive and negative effects. In other words, a diverse population is not necessarily a good thing because the plant can't feed everybody. It's when we get a good population of bugs that the plant can actually start selecting from that we have a healthy soil and an active environment. Nutrient availability determines endophytic survival. Endophytes prefer specific carbon sources. As I said before, the plant produces certain compounds to feed the bugs it's selecting for. Competition for these nutrients can be a determining factor in shaping the endophytic community within the plant. Specific nutrient availability may limit the number of endophytic microbes that can be taken up and survive inside the plant. So again, understanding that relationship is where we're at. How many people in here work with green manures? Green manures work? Absolutely. What's the best one? Well, if you read this guy's book on this green manure, it's the best. You read this guy's book, it's the best. Green manures work, and they work. Why? Well, we grow a crop, and we have that crop in the field for maybe 4 or 5 months, feeding these bugs. Then we take the crop off, there's no more food. You put a green manure in, you now how have a green living plant returning nutrients to the rhizosphere to keep these things alive. So green manures, no matter what green manure you use, will help maintain that population that you've started to build. If you're doing it right, you bring in a green manure and put it in there after you've harvested that can overwinter and cover that soil. You've got a food source for those crops. So green manures work, and I don't care which one you choose. Now, we do have good information that some rotations are different than others, but any green manure is powerful. So what have we learned? We've learned that soil health is all about the chemistry. The chemistry we feed the plant and what the plant feeds the rhizosphere. And we now have those compounds that we talked about. So we focus on nitrogen fixers, rhizobium, Pseudomonas, the gram-positives. There are some good bacillus, but for the most part they are negative. And we try to build profiles to understand who they are and how we can stimulate that whole reactivity. And again, we use NDVIs. When we select these fields, we have it correlated to biomass and yield in the field, and we're starting to look at how those NDVIs actually correlate to some of the other nutrients and some of the other parameters we're looking at. So this is a predictive model we have. The one line is the actual yields and production. The other line is a predictive model. So this algorithm we've produced is very, very accurate. I mean, its R-squared is pretty phenomenal. Now, when you look at what we've done here, we have looked at these relationships. We've looked at the relationships of the types of genes through qPCR, looking at the genes that we're looking for. We're looking at the organisms themselves and trying to predict who they were and what they're doing. Matter of fact, within this predictive model and within this, based on some of these high peaks, we actually are recognizing a disease-suppressive soil. So we're getting there. We've got a lot of stuff we don't know yet, but we've got a fairly decent predictive model to help you understand what's going on in your field. And not only that, when you do this soil health test, again, you can't see too much of this, but if your soil health index is on the low side, you look to these graphs and charts and tables. If one of these things are outside the optimum range, you work on that, your soil health index is going to go up. And based on the numbers we have and what we have done over the last 8 years, we actually know that based on certain things, we can move into that rhizosphere a certain organism. We know what the bacillus respond to. We know what the rhizobium respond to. We know what the Pseudomonas respond to. And without even going out and plating it, we can almost predict who's going to be at the table based on where this number is going to be. So that's what the soil health index looks like. We also look at the chemistry, residual chemistry. There's a lot of information out there that suggests that the compounds we're using in production agriculture are very detrimental to the health of our plants and the health of us as human beings, right? We hear it all the time. This is a good news, bad news story. If your soil health index is here, even if you have a high residual chemistry, it doesn't matter. There's only about 2 groups of compounds that are affecting these organisms, but they don't have any impact whatsoever if you have a high soil health index. These bugs are resilient enough that they can withstand anything we throw at them based on what we've seen in our soil work. So that's a good news story because we need these products. We need to be able to use these compounds to help us in production agriculture. And again, on this report, it's hard to see, we give the total respiration rate with our soil health, potential mineralizable nitrogen, and basically the biological quality of that particular soil. And that's actually showing a poor soil health test, but it's hard to read from there. So if you look at what we do, we have a whole suite of soil health tests. This is our basic soil health test. Residual chemistry test is not part of this. It's an optional test, and it's quite expensive. Most people don't actually go there because we've convinced them they don't need to. But again, we do pretty much everything. We do aggregate stability. We do SAP analysis. We do biological testing, a whole array of different things. So in summary, balanced fertility provides consistent yields and and quality, while at the same time builds a more sustainable ecological soil or healthier soil that we've talked about here. If you want to look at more of this stuff and look at where we come from and what we're doing, you can go to our website and you can download some of these newsletters that talk about where we're at and what we're doing from April through to July. If you go to this particular place on our website under soil and download these 2 tech bulletins, these 2 tech bulletins actually talk about what I've talked about this morning, give you a better understanding what soil health's all about and where we see it going in the near future. So pretty quick analysis of what we're doing today, but I assure you that this information is fairly new. We do see the correlation in it being strong, and it does give us a lot of information on how to be more productive. One thing, I'll go back to Dean Glennie's comments. I use 1.5 pounds of nitrogen to grow a bushel of corn. For most production agriculture, that one field that grew 150 bushel, if you looked at the relationship of nitrogen use, that's what we would use there. Dean Glennie's at 0.9. Our nutrient use efficiency is going to go up. Our water use efficiency is going to go up with these healthier soils. So as we start supporting the plant, so the plant can support itself to actually sequester some of these good bugs into the rhizosphere, our nutrient use efficiency, our overall productivity will increase. So going forward in the future, we'll be more focused on this just to do a better job with what we've got to work with and just be more efficient on the farm. So with that, I'll cut it off there. I think I still have a little bit of time. Yes? Our fertilizer recommendations, when you do a soil health test, we usually have you send it in with a regular soil test, and you get the recommendations on the regular soil test. So it's part of it. No, we don't, but most people that are doing a soil health test are doing a regular soil test with it. So that's where you get the recommendations. So soil health is kind of set up to give you more a description of what we expect to see in rhizobial or the rhizosphere community. Yes.
Just repeat the question if you can.
Okay, the question was, most farmers use muriate of potash as a potash source, and what kind of impact it has, is one better than the other. First of all, muriate of potash has a higher salt index, so that can be a problem, but these bugs are very resilient to that type of salt. Roots aren't, but the bugs are fairly resilient. And the chlorides in potassium muriate of potash is not chlorine, so it's not that nasty gas we've been told. It's actually an essential nutrient for plants. When I look at a sulfate source of potash versus a muriate of potash, sulfate sources of potash are taken up by the plant much quicker than a muriate because of the sulfate ion and its reaction at the root system. So other than nutrient uptake directly to the plant, there's really no difference. Muriate of potash is less expensive. Broadcasted out there, it's not going to have any difference than a sulfate source. If you're using potash in season because you have low potash availability and want to increase your potash availability, sulfate sources are better. So they're worth the extra dollar in season for planter mixes, close to crop growth, that type of thing. Yes, the microbes help solubilize all that. We have microbes that solubilize potash. We got microbes that solubilize zinc. We got microbes that solubilize phosphates. Their goal in life is to solubilize nutrients that the plant needs, and the plant will actually sequester those bugs. What you have to do is look at where that level is, because when we look at availability, too high a potash is just as bad as not enough potash. The plant will actually shut down from taking up potash once you get to a certain range. And you need to know what you can do to that soil to bring that back in range. It might be just simply drawdown. It might be the addition of calcium products to change that relationship. But when we look at potash, don't focus on parts per million. You want to focus on the exchangeable amount of potassium available to the plant. So when we look at your percent available potassium or your percent available magnesium or calcium, what we're trying to reflect on is the coefficient of diffusion. In other words, how readily available is that plant or how quickly that soil is going to give up that. You might have a soil that's high in CEC that might have 300 ppm of potash in it, but on the exchange complex it's less than 1%. The higher the clay content, the higher CEC. What that number is telling you is, yes, you've got lots there, but the soil's ability, because it has such a strong buffering capability, to release that in season is not there. So understanding that balance and that relationship is really critical when you look at nutrient availability. We have a new test we've started doing. It's not new, it's been around for a while, it's based on some research we've done, where we actually look at percent P as well. Now, it's not the same thing. It's not percentage on the exchange site. It's percent availability. And you could have 20 or 30 ppm of phosphates in soils and virtually have none available to the plant because of competition with calcium and aluminum and iron. So when we look at a soil test, what I'm trying to explain to you is don't focus so much on parts per million. All soils are not the same. How many people in here agree with me sands and clays are different? Pretty simple, right? So the mineral components of those soils are different. Their optimum capabilities and where they should be to satisfy plant requirements are different. And understanding that relationship so you understand where the plant availability exists. Now, when you look at overall coefficient of diffusion, water plays a role. So the higher the water content or water availability, the lower your coefficient of diffusion needs to be of that nutrient and still be a plant available. But the droughtier soils are, the higher the coefficient of diffusion needs to be to make it available to the plant. And that's still, again, just looking at percent saturation of those elements. I hope I didn't confuse people, but we got to start focusing on overall availability rather than just how much is there. No, that water soluble test is something completely different. It deals with soil structures, it deals with compaction, a whole bunch of different things.
We could take another question if
Yes.
there is one.
You're not gonna improve your biome by growing more legumes. You'll improve the quality of your field by having a growing crop on it more time through the season, be it a legume or be it a rye crop, some green manure. Your overall soil health is going to improve as you improve the overall nutrition to the plant so the plant can return the carbon source to feed these bugs. And that takes about 5 years to get going in the right direction. Your soils all have the right population of bugs in them to get to that without any inoculation of an outside product. These biologicals that are coming on the market today are just a helping step to get there. So if I got a poor productive field, if I put on a biological, I'll get a response. But if I don't put a fertility package behind it to help the plant feed those bugs I just put on, they're going to die off. So I can do it naturally. It would take me longer. But if I buy a product, the bugs in the jug, if you will, and I put it on, and I understand the concepts I've just talked about on having the plant have enough nutrients that it can feed the biome, you'll get there faster. You follow me? So green manures have something there sustaining the sugar force, the carbon source going back to the population. I want to build that population and continue to bring it up. What we didn't believe is we didn't think that we'd see a significant response from the bulk soil. But our bulk soils in a field that's healthier to start with are significantly different than a poor field. So we do see some relationships. And in a healthier field, our bulk soils are, again, the right population is there. You don't see it as much as the diversity changes after the crop's gone. But the field's ability to rebound once we put a crop in there and the plant be able to select for this community is faster in these fields where we've started to build that population. I hope I didn't confuse everything there, but as we go forward, we understand what we need to get that population built up. It continually gets better. So our reservoir of the good bugs gets bigger. the plant's ability to sequester the right bugs into the rhizosphere is greater. Okay? What's that? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We actually, in Dean Glennie's case, he's been no-till for a long, long time, and he's got great productivity. I mean, his field's number one in our research. We convinced him to plow up one field. I thought he was going to have a heart attack, but he did it. And we actually saw a yield response. So reduced till, I mean, it's better conservation of soils and all that good stuff goes with it, but it's not necessarily an indicator of soil health. Okay? Well, thank you for your attention. I hope I shed some light on this whole soil health issue, and it's not about pennies decomposing in soils.
If we could just share our thanks with Greg for spending some time with us. Thank you very much. I'm sure, Greg, you wouldn't mind catching a conversation or two up on the outside concourse. With that, it brings us to our final speaker of the morning. We will be hearing Soil Health in a Changing Climate, a new research project with Stephen Crittenden, a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Stephen is currently a research scientist in the Soil Nutrient Management Division at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada here in Brandon, Manitoba. He studied soil.
Thanks for tuning in to the Manitoba Ag Days podcast. We'll see you next year from January 22nd to 24th, 2019.